evening and welcome to Better Together, sharing our lupus stories. What's up? My name is Chanel Gabriel, and we are all the way live and talking about living our best lives with lupus. Allow me to reintroduce my co host. Welcome to the virtual stage, Dr. Michaela Baird.
Hello, Chanel. How was your week?
It was good. And that first episode we did last week, Tuesday, the week before last, had me on such a high this past week. It's been really great. A lot of travel, but I've definitely been replaying that, and I hope people out there do it as well. That first season premiere had me feeling so good. Some vulnerable moments and some great guests.
No, me
You
too,
know,
Chanel. It was so important. We discussed integration of care. We talked about holistic care. So if all the viewers out there missed it, make sure you look us up and check out our past episodes at youtube.com/at Better Together Lupus.
yes, and we had some great information, some great lupus stories. I hope you check it out. Well, last week we talked about the way lupus operates systemically with inside of our body. But today we're going to talk about what lupus does to the largest organ in our body, the skin. Dr. Michaela, I'm curious with you, how often do you see lupus of the skin bothering your patients or impacting the skin of your patients?
It really is something we see all the time. In my practice, I would estimate that 70% of people that I treat living with lupus definitely have skin involvement. And it's something that really helps me make a diagnosis too, because I see it a lot on presentation. So, as a lupus patient yourself, what would you say? What do you think about the skin involvement? How is it showing up for you and on your skin?
Well, I think right when I was diagnosed, I definitely had the butterfly rash. That's, I guess, how everybody thinks of lupus. They think of the butterfly. People kept saying they thought I had freckles, but it was a
Oh,
dark
really?
patch on my face.
Hmm.
And I don't have any photos with it, but it sort of looked like this image that we have here.
Hmm.
Kind of presented itself where it was like a little pattern around my cheeks, dark under my eyes, a little bit on my cheeks. But I also noticed I was wiped out from being around the sun. And now I know that's pretty common. People are like, if you're in the sun all day, of course. But I noticed for me, being in the sun for too long, definitely took a longer time to recover. I wonder why, right?
Yeah, we're definitely going to be touching on that today, Chanel. Actually, our topic is beneath the surface, lupus, and the skin. So, we have some great guests who will be sharing their experiences on how they manage the skin challenges they've had with lupus. I'm really
Yes.
excited to hear from them.
It's going to be good. It's great conversation. And our first guest is Ray Collins, aka Rachel Collins, who's going to tell you that she is a bold black lupus lioness who is fearfully and wonderfully made. Amen.
Yes, thank
Right?
you.
Ray is a customer service leader by day and a tech enthusiast and vegan bacon queen by night. Prior to having lupus, she never had any problems with her skin, but during the pandemic, that changed. And she's going to share a little bit about how. But a fun fact about you, Ray, you sang alto and no, you sang alto soprano in the college choir.
I did. I did. I miss it so, so much. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So now I only sing in the shower. But it was a really fun time in my life. I miss it a lot.
Oh, definitely. I actually was a choir director of my college
Oh
choir too,
my
soprano too. Whoop, whoop. But
God.
so
Okay.
happy to have you here, Ray Collins. We're so happy to have you on.
Thank you for
And
having me.
next, yes, thank you. And next we have Dr. Charisma Atkins. Yes, I'm gonna say doctor. Dr. Charisma. Hi.
Hi, how are you all this evening?
Great.
Doing great. Doing great. So, Dr. Charisma Atkins is a native of Atlanta, Georgia. A is the A in the house. Make some noise in the chat, right?
Yes, yes.
She has over 15 years of experience in public health. While living with lupus for the past 25 years, she obtained her doctorate in public health and became a licensed esthetician. I can't wait to talk about that. She is a rattler, which means she is an alum of Florida A&M University. I know my sister is an alum. I pretend I went there too. But I also can't leave out the fact that she is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Yes.
Yes, yes,
Her
yes, yes.
You do all the good things. And her fun fact is she says shopping gives her peace and inspires her to keep going. Me too. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Charisma
Thank you
Atkins.
for having me.
Oh, so glad to have you. And last but not least, we have someone who's kind of a big deal in the world of dermatology, specifically when it comes to autoimmune skin diseases. We are
Yes.
delighted to have here Dr. Victoria Worth. Thank you. Now, Dr. Victoria Worth is a professor of dermatology and medicine at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine and chief of the Division of Dermatology at the Philadelphia Veterans Administration Hospital. Whew. All right, I got to give you a couple more rounds of applause because you are the co founder and previous president of the Rheumatologic Dermatology Society, and your research has centered extensively on cutaneous lupus, which we're excited to have you tell us a little bit more about. And your goal has been and has been to find ways to successfully understand, measure, and treat lupus activity on the skin and find paths to new treatments. So glad to
Yes,
have you.
so amazing, Dr. Worth. You have done such pivotal work, especially looking at new markers to help us monitor lupus skin activity and severity and so much more. So, thank you for your work and welcome. Dr. Worth will also be joining us for our segment Spotlight on Research, where we'll be going through myths and truths about the path to new treatments. So,
Yeah,
excited to work with you today.
And it's great to be
definitely.
here. We are making a lot of advances, and it's really important to highlight the skin. And so happy to be here for that.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you. And if you're watching out there, please prepare to take some notes. But that's not the only thing to write. Please, viewers, you are a part of this conversation. Comment, ask questions in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Where y'all from? Where y'all from? Let us know, okay? But we are all here together. And now it's time to get our first guest back on stage. If everyone out there can put some purple hearts in the chat as we welcome Ray Collins.
Hello.
Yay! So, welcome, Ray. We're so happy to have you here with us. And as we always do, we ask our guests to share their lupus story.
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit about my lupus story. I was diagnosed in 2012. Um, the more I think about it, I realized there were several kind of stressful things happening in my life at that time, but I was just switching jobs and I was working at the front desk of a hotel at that time. And I had some swollen digits. So I noticed like a couple fingers were swollen. And then a few days later, like my knee was swollen. And then after a while, that didn't go away. So I decided to go to the doctor. And then the doctor did some testing. And then when the blood work and everything came back, he looked at the testing and said, um, I want you to go to a rheumatologist. And I
Mm.
inquired further about why, and he wouldn't give me the details, which made me more nervous. And I finally went to the rheumatologist, and he did further testing, and he confirmed or told me that I had a disease called lupus, which I had heard of, but I didn't know details about at that time. So it was like, it feels weird saying it was devastating, but it was kind of devastating at that point, just the unknown, lots and lots of tears. Thank God my mom was with me. So um, yeah, they just let me stay in the office for as long as I needed to, and that's what I did, and that's kind of how my diagnosis went. And then a few months later, I had my first flare, and that came with something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, where it's affects your nervous system, and I was paralyzed for a few months and had to do rehab. So I had both of those things concurrently. It wasn't fun, but I had a lot of support. My family was there. I had lots of advocates when I was not aware of what was going on. Um, and yeah, here I am today. Thank God.
So glad to see that you are here, and that's a lot to overcome, especially at the same time and juggling. But I know prior to having lupus, you shared that you didn't have any issues with your skin. And so what changes did you see?
Yeah. So initially, I had no skin activity with the lupus at all. So diagnosed in 2012, and then I would say, when was the pandemic? The 2022, somewhere around there. When the pandemic hit, I started noticing little patches around my upper cheeks. Um, and yeah, there was just so much going on. I didn't know what the patches were. They were itchy, um, and then like a little bit dark, maybe slightly purple. Um, then I started doing some digging, and I wasn't familiar with the butterfly rash either because I had never had it. So as I started doing the research, I found out about the butterfly rash, and yeah, that's what it was. And it started off as little patches, and when I didn't know what it was, I was kind of scratching it, silly me. And then yeah, it kind of got worse, and then it was pretty classic butterfly rash, and it actually also extended kind of like to my upper cheeks, and it was just a mess. And I eventually found a dermatologist that was familiar with the lupus, of the skin. And it took some researching, but she gave me some creams and then series of different things that I'll tell you if you want me to, were really helpful in kind of helping to get my skin back. And I'm still trying to get it back, but it is like, I would say 80% better than what it was during the pandemic.
Mm.
I'm so glad that you actually mentioned what it looked like because, as we all know, it can look so different on every type of skin tone. So, thank you for sharing what it looked like on you. So, what did you find really helped you manage your symptoms, especially the skin symptoms?
Sure, yeah. Um, in the beginning, I didn't really have much. I was just kind of going with things that I researched. I was trying to put aloe on it, things to calm down the itch, just trying to stay out of the sun as much as possible. I'm fairly certain that helped, to not exacerbate whatever was going on at the time. And then I ended up having to go to the dermatologist. I went to a couple of dermatologists actually, but the one I found was really good, and she finally prescribed something that worked for me. So it was a topical cream she gave me, and yeah, I'm able to use that whenever like it still pops up sometimes, but I'll use it as soon as possible, and it'll kind of like calm it down. And that with the medication, because I'm on two medications, and one of them also assists with the skin lupus problem. So that's
Mhm.
basically that. It was the medical, staying out of the sun helped me a lot, and also trying to keep the stress low. Eventually, after the skin started to kind of calm down, I had discoid problems on my ears too, which was
Wow.
really horrifying. That was probably a little worse than the cheeks, but also
Mhm.
connected to a stressful time in my life. But yeah, the topicals helped a lot.
Mhm.
And for our viewers who don't know what that is, discoid is a different type of skin symptom you can get in the setting of lupus that looks a little different than when we talk about the malar or butterfly rash. So, there's a lots of different ways, as you're mentioning, that skin can show up with lupus. Um, and to add to all of that, you haven't only dealt with lupus, but also you have a diagnosis of Guillain-Barré syndrome. So, how are you navigating both of these?
Yeah, thank goodness the Guillain-Barré, that was a one-time effect that it had on me. That popped up during that one time when I had the my very first lupus flare, and there there were not any, I would say, like really significant long-term effects. I would say the one thing that does still occur sometimes because it affects my nervous system, I believe, sometimes like the fine motor skills, I'll
Mhm.
see a little bit of a difference there. Um,
Will you
but it,
explain that for our viewers?
yeah, so like drinking a cup of coffee, sometimes I'll get like a little tiny tremble, or sometimes if I'm in the hair salon and I have to like hold my head straight, like I won't really hold it super straight. It'll like I'll have a little shimmy whether or not I want to. Um, yeah, those things. It was much worse initially, and I think over time still it's getting better. But yeah, still a little bit of residual from there.
Yeah, well, like one other question. I guess, with all of these different symptoms that you've had, this, clear that, how did you, I mean, I can imagine what the emotional toll of having this happen. And I'm just curious, how did you, how are you able to deal with the emotional toll of having something change on your skin?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Um, it was shocking because I, like I said, did not ever have any real significant skin problems since high school.
Mhm.
When I had pimples, but um, in like eating, I changed my diet. I stopped eating dairy. I believe that helped me a lot. More consistently wearing sunscreen. And then, really important for me was to remember to reapply every 2 hours because apparently one application is not good enough. And then yoga. Yoga helped me a lot. I really like yoga. I do it as much as possible throughout the week. And yeah, just kind of trying to protect my peace as much as possible, keeping great people around me, filtering out all the mess. And those are the main things I would say. Travel as much as possible.
I know you just got back from a trip that I
Strangers
wish I
left.
went to.
Yeah, send me back. Send me back, Chanel.
No, but I really appreciate you saying all of these things that you have to do because I know that navigating when your skin, some for a lot of people, their skin is the first thing people see. So, thank you for sharing some of the ways that you both have figured out how to manage your own symptoms, but also just recognizing like it's a lot. It's a lot, and you're doing it. You're still figuring it out. You're still growing. So, thank you for being transparent and sharing that with us.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we are going to check back in with you a little bit later in this show, but we're so excited to talk to our next guest, who we're going to welcome to the virtual stage. So now, everybody, please put some purple hearts in the chat for Dr. Charisma Atkins. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, 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 hi.
So glad to have you join this show. Like Madam Rattler, like my sister Michelle and her husband Aaron. That was how we first got connected.
Yes, yes.
We're so
So
grateful to have you here. And again, like we ask every guest, can you share your personal lupus story?
Yeah, sure. I was diagnosed in 2000, late 2000. I was in my master's program for public health.
Mhm.
It was during our curriculums, our comprehensive exams. So obviously, I was stressed and I was trying to do my best, get through it, trying to graduate. I was going to graduate the following semester.
Mhm.
And I was having problems with my fingers holding pens and things. Now, this is wasn't abnormal from ever since I can remember. I've always cracked my knuckles, my knees, my feet, my toes. I've always done that. And
mhm.
I'm only one in my family that did that, and they used to ignore everybody to the heavens. So it wasn't abnormal for me to crack my fingers and for them to get swollen. And I just always just took a Motrin.
Mhm.
Mm.
That's a different story. But I went home for Christmas and I laid in my childhood bedroom one night, went to sleep, and then in the middle of the night, tried to get up to go to the bathroom and I couldn't. I had to call my little brother who was in high school at the time for him to come pick me up to take me
Mm.
to the bathroom. He yelled for our parents, obviously. And the next morning we went to my dad's primary care, who he always went to. They wheeled me in because I couldn't walk. And as I'm sitting there in the office, a running commercial about, do your bones ache? Do your joints hurt? Well, you might have lupus. And it was like a running loop of the pharmaceutical rep drugs. And it just kept going over and over. And because I was walking, I was sitting there for quite a long time. So I saw this commercial running a loop for about 10 minutes. And finally, I just looked at my mom and said, I have that. And so when I went back to the doctor, he said, yeah, he thought I did because of what I was complaining about. He did the ANA for me at the office. He was an internist, and he called me later that day. He said, you have lupus. You need to go to this rheumatologist. I went to the rheumatologist the following day. He put me on prednisone. Oh, well, sorry. He put me on a steroid, and he sent me on my way.
Mm.
I went home, took it, and by that night I was up and at 'em. And because it was Christmas break, I was just trying to get to my friends. And
Mm.
Yeah.
I was fairly young, 21, 22. So, and I just wanted to get back to being normal. So there began my journey. I continued on that path for quite a long time until it started affecting my kidneys, in which I was diagnosed with lupus nephritis in
Mm.
2014.
Mm-hmm.
And um, still was continuing on. And all this time, I had very minor flares. None of my doctors were ever really concerned about a flare, because my flares were usually just handled with a a steroid or going to sleep or something very calming. It was never a big ordeal. So nobody was really truly concerned about a flare. But when it happened to the kidneys, obviously that was a big flare. I ended up getting I forget what it's called, but it's what the older people get now, shingles. I got shingles. Um, and there began my journey. I ended up going on dialysis, getting the transplant,
Mm.
and I'm here now. Post transplant, 3 years, so everything is great.
Wow. I just have to stop and say that's a big deal. You kind of, brought us through your story, but that transplant piece is huge. So I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
I did kind of want to ask you because you've had this career in public health. How has your illness influenced the type of work you do in public health?
Sure. Yeah. My goal was always to be an epidemiologist in infectious disease. Now, I know lupus is more chronic, but some of the symptoms that come on sporadically, very suddenly, um, cause my interest to peak. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm.
while I've been in my career, I worked on different illnesses. I've also worked on lupus. And so I've always tailored my piece to understanding the disparities associated with different illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that lupus affects primarily minority women. 9 out of 10 women are diagnosed with lupus. Of that, 80 to 90% are Black women. Also, for kidneys, 9 out of 10 of women that are diagnosed with lupus will have a kidney impairment. So it's all about disparities and understanding the disparities and how I, as a public health practitioner, can identify those disparities and advocate for better resources, for better research, for the community, specifically Black women and minority women, to live a better and more fuller life, even with lupus.
Mm, thank you. Thank you for the work you did. And I mean, in just recognizing the numbers, thank you for bringing those in here. We always try to highlight how much it impacts our community, but very much you made it so transparent and clear and explained it right away. So now we're talking about the skin. I know we went over a lot of background for you, but we're talking about the skin here. So now can you tell us just how has lupus impacted your skin over the years?
Well, here's the thing. I've always had a dermatologist because I had acne growing up, and I had acne very early.
Mm.
I'm talking about 8, 9 years old. So I've always been to a dermatologist, and I've always known like what to use on my skin. Now I've run through several brands, several systems because my skin was always constantly changing. And so, but I've always kept a good routine of how to cleanse my skin. I was definitely afraid of getting the butterfly rash. I'm a little vain, I have to admit. That was at the time, that would have been my worst fear, to get the rash. And so, because of that, I went to aesthetic school to learn further about how to treat the skin, how to recognize impairments in the skin. And that has helped me a lot because I know what to do. I know what products to use. I know what ingredients to look for to help me with the skin. The flip side of that is I do get bruises because that lupus patients
Mm,
have that impairment of the blood vessels that don't allow bruises to heal fully like someone else that is not impaired by it. So I get bruises and dealing with the kidney and going to the doctors and getting IVs and everything. My bruises stick around for a very long time before they go away. As an esthetician, I know how to treat them, but they always are there. And the
mhm,
worst kind that I had in the history of this journey, I had discoid on my knees and my elbows, and that was like my worst part of the skin um, journey. But
mhm,
I deal with it. I went to what I knew from aesthetic school. I went to what I knew from the dermatologist of how to treat it, what products to use, what ointments, what creams. And so I am faithful in doing my regimen every single day, morning and night, for the bruises, for my knees, for my skin, for everything, even my hair, because lupus does affect the hair as well. So even for the
mhm.
hair, I am very diligent about my routine to avoid those pitfalls of lupus or just to live through it the best way I can. And the best way I can is just to be able to recognize it, understand it, and treat it the best way I can.
Well, I just want to say you sound like you are very much an empowered loopy, lupus warrior in a sense, because sometimes we have these symptoms, and I know I get the bruising a lot, especially because I have lupus antiphospholipid syndrome, so I take blood thinners.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's times I'm like, I don't want to go outside in shorts. I don't want to look like somebody was beating on me. And
Yeah,
I need to, I'm
yeah,
like, oh, I might wear pants today,
yeah.
or you bump yourself somewhere. But thank you so much for sharing your experience there, with just dealing with skin issues. Thank you. That's so great.
Oh, you're
Yes,
welcome.
thank you. So, Charisma, you have a beauty and skincare business, Simply Charisma. Tell us how that got started.
Oh, that started from aesthetic school. I worked in several different day spas that were geared more towards the um, the spa lifestyle, but I wanted my business to focus on chronic disease patients because largely because when you sign these release forms, the there's a part of it that always recognizes if you have a chronic disease, if you put yes, the nature of the industry is you have to avoid a whole lot of treatments. You have to avoid microderm. You have to avoid um, chemical peels or microderm or dermaplane, all these skin treatments that are used to help uplift and brighten the skin, you're supposed to avoid them for chronic disease patients, largely because the skin is sensitive for us and they don't want the liability if something goes wrong.
Right.
So my business is focused on helping chronic disease patients reach their beauty potential, giving them treatments that work for their skin, but also allowing them to experience what a spa would be like, how it feels to have a towel on your face, how it feels to see the chemical peel work. And it just helps patients or warriors know that there is life with lupus. There is life with chronic conditions, but you just have to find a specialist that is going to work with you and not treat you just like a regular um, patient. So
That
that's
sounds
Beautiful.
what
like a
it's about.
Oh, sorry. That sounds like a lot of really targeted support because I know definitely you go to a spa, you say something's wrong, they're like, bye, girl. We're not
Yeah,
touching that skin. So
yeah,
being able to, and I also love the fact that you also combine what you learned from the dermatologist as well as the work that you've done as an esthetician. It's
mhm.
really, really important. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And we're going to get a lovely tip from you, what you think helps you towards the end of the show. But
Okay.
yeah, just if I had a limited time, I would start probing your brain right now, but we definitely have to get to the next guest. So
No,
we'll
no
bring you
problem.
back in a few. We'll bring you
Okay,
back in a few.
okay. I look forward to it.
So our next guest is a powerhouse in her own right. She is uber accomplished as a dermatologist and very much the who's who when it comes to lupus impacting the skin. Please welcome Dr. Victoria Worth.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Hi, welcome back, Dr. Worth. Thank you for joining us. We want to get right into it, and we want you to share with our viewers your knowledge on what is the difference between systemic lupus and cutaneous lupus.
All right, well, that's a tall order there. But it turns out that some people who have lupus only have involvement in the skin. And then there are a lot of people with who have systemic lupus who also have involvement in the skin. And the involvement in the skin can be very similar between those who only have skin and those who have skin and systemic disease. And so sometimes some of us like to think of it more like a spectrum disease where, that you have some features of systemic lupus, but mainly skin problems or vice versa, or you have both kinds of issues. But typically with cutaneous lupus, you might not have the ANA, you might not have some of the other features of systemic lupus, such as arthritis. You're not going to have kidney disease. And so the things that we've been hearing about today are not going to happen. And if they do, then that's part of systemic disease.
Got
Thank
it.
you. So I'm hearing it's a spectrum, but that there's definitely, there's people who can have both, and people can fall at different places along that spectrum.
Absolutely. And also people who have cutaneous lupus need to be followed in terms of their exam and some of their lab testing on a regular basis to make sure that they don't go from cutaneous lupus to more systemic. And so even if it's just skin, so to speak, it does require ongoing care, ongoing testing.
Got it. Got it. That's so helpful because I thought they were both the same thing. So thank you for clarifying that for me. Now, if someone doesn't properly manage their symptoms when it relates to the skin, what are the things that they can worry about? We heard Ray speak specifically, and we heard a little bit from Charisma. But what are some things that can happen?
Right. So there's symptoms which are like itch or pain, and then there's signs which are what we are hearing about in terms of sometimes redness, sometimes scaling, and other times as those get better, turning into more hyperpigmentation, darker skin colors. So and so these are all elements of cutaneous lupus that need to be treated, and the way to treat is in different ways. But essentially, what we want to do is when somebody has an active lupus in the skin, we want to treat it to prevent more lesions from developing. That's probably the most important thing. Because part of it, almost what I'd call healing, which doesn't look like healing, is that as the skin is healing up, you might have scarring, you might have pigmentation. So you want to prevent that from happening as much as possible by limiting the amount of activity in the skin, which would start out as more the redness, more the scale and pain and itch.
So it's really helpful when we think about treatment. And, of course, a big component for the skin is prevention. So outside of treatment, like what would be the big takeaways you want to share about prevention of active lupus in the skin?
Yeah, I think that's the most important aspect, actually. And so one of the things that we heard about today already is sunscreen. And we often advocate for a higher SPF than what you might hear about. With skin cancers, maybe an SPF of 15 or 30 might be sufficient to prevent skin cancers. But when somebody's very sensitive to the skin, or to the sun, which can happen in patients with lupus, they have to be even more careful. And so we use SPFs of sometimes 70 or even 100, like on the face, to try to prevent any kind of breakouts as much as possible. And then to reapply, we heard about if you go in the water, certainly having a sunscreen that is not going to be coming off immediately is great, but then you still need to reapply. So there are some other tricks. So another trick is to try to go out early in the morning or late in the afternoon or evening and avoid the peak hours of the day when the amount of ultraviolet radiation is the highest. And that's really hard for people, and people don't want to stay inside. It's very depressing to not be able to do what other people are doing. So one of the other things to think about is to wear clothing. There's good sun protective clothing now, which comes as SPF rating. So you don't necessarily have to coat everything on your body. You can put on good clothing that functions like a sunscreen. And I think that's a lot easier for some people to do. And you can even go in the water with that. I mean, it's not outlandish anymore, I think, to wear clothing if you're in the sun. Wear a hat. But also remember that even if you're doing all those things, the sun is bouncing off of the sand or water if you're on the beach. And you might think you're in the shade under an umbrella, but you're still getting radiation. About 60% of the sun will come in underneath the umbrella just by bouncing off the water or the sand. So again, emphasizing that it's great to go out more early morning, late afternoon, but then to take all these other preventive measures that I just mentioned.
Oh, I am a sun baby. I'm a June baby. So I absolutely love being in the sun. And I think one of my biggest flares, more recent flares, was definitely me taking a lot of liberty and happening to accidentally fall asleep in the sun. And it messed me up. So I understand the importance of sunscreen. That's super important. And I guess what's one question that I just kind of thought, what if I do have an outbreak, if I do have cutaneous lupus or whatever, and I have an outbreak, what should I not do to it? What should I maybe not put on it? What should I avoid?
Well, one thing is it might be symptomatic and you might want to scratch it. That's probably not a good thing to do because you can actually bring out more spots and keep it from healing. So you want to not touch it or scratch, even though you might be tempted to do that. And then, you have to make sure that you get a treatment that will hopefully help resolve the redness. You can do certain things to help with the itch, but you really need something that's going to contain the inflammation in the skin, which is causing the itch or the pain and the redness. And so it's a combination of factors, and also being really careful. If you've had a reaction and you're sun sensitive, then you need to be much more careful than you might otherwise.
Definitely. Thank you. I just wanted to bring that as an avid pimple popper. I won't even lie. I watched the show and I'm very gross. I know that my habit is my natural nature. I'm sorry if I gross anyone out there. But my natural habit is to pick things. So I can imagine that being a challenge when somebody has it. So just not touching it and really trying to get some treatments to help manage it. That's something that would be helpful. So you also mentioned to us that you have a special educational event coming up. I know you are located out in Pennsylvania, but can you tell us about it just a little bit?
Yes, I will. One of the things that has been really good for lupus, I think, is there's a group called Lupus Therapeutics that tries, and we're going to talk later, I guess, about trials, but they really try to support trials in lupus. So one of their concerns is that if you look at actually who gets lupus, and we heard it's a lot of people with darker skin. But if you look at the trials, there's a big discordance between the number of people who get lupus and who's doing the trials. And we want to know that as we get new treatments, that we're actually testing them in the people who are getting lupus. So one of the things that the Lupus Therapeutics group wanted to do was to figure out how to educate people more about trials, just like is going on today. They have a group called Project Change, and we're going to have a meeting on actually June 7th in Philadelphia for like 3 hours. So if you live in Philadelphia, you can certainly reach out. But it's going to be a community-based event in a church in West Philadelphia, and we're going to have a panel of people who will talk about lupus, but also about the trials, and it's very important for people to be aware of this.
Awesome. I know we have Callie in the building. I'm looking through the chat just to see where everyone's from. Hopefully we have Lexington, Kentucky. Hopefully we have somebody in Philly that can join in.
That would be great.
Thank you, Dr. Worth, for the important work you are doing. It's so amazing that you're pulling the community in that way. And now we're going to have you stay with us as we move to our special segment on Better Together called Spotlight on Research. So this segment is a space to explain the journey that leads to new treatments. And Dr. Worth, you are on the front line. You're working to bring new treatments. We talked about all of your amazing work in cutaneous lupus, or lupus that impacts the skin, for lupus patients everywhere. And your investigator site is located in Pennsylvania, right?
That's correct. In Philadelphia, the University of Pennsylvania.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about what brought you into the work that you're doing and the research that you're doing.
Sure. So I've been in the field for a few decades, and when I first entered, um, people were giving certain treatments, but it turned out there were absolutely never been a trial in cutaneous lupus, and it turns out that you can't do a trial if you don't have a way to measure an outcome. And so it really felt like starting at the beginning and developing an outcome measure that could look at the skin and measure improvement. And as a result, then being able to look at how skin having lupus impacts how people feel, their quality of life, and looking at those kinds of correlations is really very important. And then figuring out what in the blood or in the skin is correlating with activity. And so over time, and it's not just me, but many people in the field have been looking for ways to try to improve treatment. And so my motivation for doing all of this was to get to a point where we could actually evaluate the treatments we have, but also look for new treatments that might be safer or better. And we clearly are still in a place where we need to do that because it's been 70 years or more since we've had a treatment approved for cutaneous lupus. And only recently had systemic lupus approved. But and there's not been so many drugs there, but lots of efforts. And it's only now because we have a way to measure skin that there's now increasing effort and interest to look at how to improve the skin in patients with lupus.
Oh, well, definitely. Well, for this, thank you for the work that you're doing and for pioneering this work. And for this spotlight on research, we're kind of going over this clinical trial process, but some of the things people don't always get right when it comes to talking about clinical trials. So we're going to try this. Number one, like fact or fiction. Clinical trials are so humans can try new unsafe treatments. Is that a fact or a fiction?
All right. Are you asking me that question?
Yeah, I am asking you this question.
Actually, no. I mean, there are many steps that are required before you ever get to testing a new treatment in people. First, you have to have a really good reason why you want to test a treatment. And usually it's going to be in a lab, and it may be in an animal that looks like they have lupus. There are going to be tests you get to before you ever think about testing a drug in humans. And then there's going to be testing in people who don't have lupus to make sure that the drug is safe for those people. So then if you finally get to a point, which can take many years of testing a treatment, the initial treatments are going to just be maybe getting the drug one time and making sure it's safe and making sure what the, how it's digested, so to speak, in the body. And then the next step might be to do multiple treatments, maybe to see, again, safety and efficacy. But it's a whole process. It takes many years, and it's not a matter of testing unsafe treatments, but it's rather finding the best treatments that can be proven to be safe over time. And then they're tested in the trials.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm hearing this is stepwise and safety first.
Absolutely.
So we have another question for you, Dr. Worth, still in the hot seat. When you sign up for a trial, do you give unlimited access of your health information, which gets shared?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. And it turns out that even if a company is funding a trial, the way the data is shared is in a very de-identified way where they could never trace it back to the person. And it's really very, very carefully handled in ways that very safe methods of sharing that data. And it's very regimented. It's really very, very difficult to do trials. There are many levels of security that are required. There are many people, you have an IRB, which is a way of reviewing a protocol to make sure that it's properly designed. And within that protocol, you talk about how you're going to handle the data. And there's just a lot of oversight. So no, your data does not get shared in an open kind of fashion.
Yeah. And I want to point out two really important words you used, which were de-identified. So that's removing someone's name, where they live, date of birth, any information that would help us understand who that person is just by looking at the data is removed. And then you also mentioned IRBs, which, as you said, are institutional review boards that are tasked with really making sure the studies are safe and set up in a way that protects the person volunteering their time.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for clarifying, both of you, putting it together. Because, yeah, I do think that that's a big there's a lot of folk and a lot of misinformation around information, right? So we're gonna keep you. I like this hot seat that we have. This is really fun. And Dr. Worth, you're all like prepared for it. Okay, you know this stuff. This is child's play for you. But so number three, if you get sick during a clinical trial, this is fact or fiction. The idea is that they won't help you get better because the priority is studying the drug.
Well, actually, if you get sick during a trial, there's all kinds of protections to record what's called an adverse event or a serious adverse event. These are all things that are reported immediately to the site and taken very seriously. If somehow there's thought that is in any way related to the drug, they break the blind immediately to figure out, is this just from a placebo where the person maybe their lupus is flaring, or is this from a medication? So every attempt is made to make sure that that we understand what's going on. And then there's also treatment that's offered independent. The most important thing is treating a person, and the drug trial comes very much second. So if somebody's having a flare of their disease, there's no way that they may be taken out of the trial. They may be treated, and it really becomes a discussion between the trial site, the patient, and the people that are supervising the trial to decide what's the best thing for the patient.
Yes, it's great to know there's so much thought that goes into making sure people are well and safe while they're in the trials.
Yeah.
So we have another question for you. During a clinical trial, you have to give up your doctor to use the ones doing the research. So is that true or false?
So that's a great question. And in general, it's very important to maintain contact and care with your original doctor. The trial site is going to manage the trial, but they're not going to manage your clinical condition. And there's going to be communication between your doctor and the clinical trial. And what I would say is, if there are things that are needed in terms of your care, it's that kind of communication is really important, because any changes in clinical care might impact the trial. And so it's not that you don't see your doctor or that they're not in charge. And very often after the trial is over, basically you're going to revert completely to the care of your original doctor, and unless they happen to be the person that saw you before you went into the trial. And so there's no, you should not be concerned that the trial site is going to take over.
Great.
Oh, no. Thank you. And I know that for a lot of people, I've seen this as if somebody wants access to care, being a part of a clinical trial actually is an option. If somebody is having challenges, so there are people that have gotten access to really good care and really good follow-up as part of the clinical trial. We know that that's not necessarily the only reason to join a clinical trial, but I know, like, when I was in one, I felt like everybody was looking at my labs and everybody was really just paying extra attention. So that was something I thought is important.
Yeah, no, I think trials are a really good way to have very detailed management and care. And for a lot of people who are really having a hard time with their lupus, to build that bond with the team that are doing studies can be really helpful, not just physically, but emotionally, to understand what the disease and the impact, and to have people you can really rely on.
Thank you. Sorry, one last question and we'll leave you alone. Okay, we'll pull you out of the hot seat. So, fact or fiction, and this is something a lot of people say because of the history, because of different experience. They only do clinical trials on people of color. That is, I think my uncle believes that.
Yeah, so we know that about 42% of people who have lupus are Black. We know that about 12 or 14% of people in clinical trials are Black. So clearly there's this huge disconnect, and clearly we're not really recruiting people who are getting the disease to be able to get the better therapies, and also to basically have it evaluated, because it may be different between Blacks and whites, and we need to have everybody involved in trials. So I would say that that's not the case.
Thank you. I know, like I said, I know my uncle very much was like, no, they're just trying to test it out on us. And to hear that actually the opposite is true and when it comes to the numbers, and that this is something that we need to start thinking about even more, how we increase that. It's really important. And just want to say round of applause. Thank you for being so great in the hot seat tonight.
Thank
It
you for
seems like
having
there are a
me.
lot of huh? You did
Thank you for
well.
having me.
Oh,
Of
no,
course.
thank you. There are so many misconceptions about clinical trials. And so we thank you for bringing the spotlight, as they say, on what's really happening. And this was great. This was great.
Thank you.
Ah, man, I feel like I've learned a lot today. I feel like I've learned a lot today. We're gonna bring everybody back on. I think we should bring everybody back on for some closing thoughts and responses. So I think I kind of mentioned what the question was going to be, but having to manage your skin is definitely hard work. I'm terrible. I remember getting like what was the one? I can't even say the name because I don't even know if it's still used, but getting what was on TV and using that on my skin, and I was terrible at it. Some people have really strict regimens and some struggle with basic routines, and even still lupus can be unpredictable. So what encouragement or practices do you have for someone who is having challenges with lupus on their skin and who is just trying to get in the habit of now having to take care of their skin? We're going to go around. I'm wondering if I can get maybe Ray, would you like to kick us off? Like, what advice do you have?
Hmm. What advice for continuing like with a consistent regimen, basically? Is that where you're?
Consistent regimen or just something you say, if somebody says they have a skin issue, what support what would you suggest for them?
Hmm. I would say research. Do some research in addition to seeking medical attention. Get get with Google and get the clicky clacking and just find out as much information as you can. That has always been helpful for me. And then I'm able to arm myself when I go to the doctor and I'll have some informed questions and comments for them. And then prayer. I would say, because in general, because sometimes this is very overwhelming. So sometimes I take a moment, I pray, I center myself, kind of collect myself and get my game plan together, and then I'm off. So those two things are helpful.
No, thank you. Thank you. So we have prayer, we have meditation, we have also the Googles, which can be helpful, right? Just being able to at least have some ideas of questions to go to our doctors with. Charisma, what's your thought?
Um, in general, consult your dermatologist and your other medical providers. Um, keep it simple. There are a lot of products on the market. You need three basic ones. You need a cleanser, you need a toner, and you need an SPF. You don't need a serum this, a serum that, a night cream. I keep
Not
keep
even for
it
the wrinkles? Not even.
no keep
Vitamin C.
no keep it simple. A really good cleanser, a toner. I'm in the South, so we use toners all the time, but because of the heat, and then a really good SPF, like what Dr. Worth talked about. Knowing what the SPF is also, and knowing what level you need for different situations. And then also finding whatever brings you joy. So when you are having a flare and when you are in those moments, what is it that brings you joy? I mentioned shopping brings me joy. So I'm having a moment, I'm online shopping. So whatever brings you joy, but primarily for skin, keep it simple.
Mm. I was gonna say I can't have too much joy online shopping. I gotta be careful with that.
Hmm.
That might lead me to distress when I look at my bank account. But
Right.
definitely, but definitely finding the things that bring us joy is super
Yeah.
important. Oh, so Dr. Worth, what's your thoughts? What's some advice that you have for somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with anything that has been said. And I think the only other thing is if you have an active area of lupus, that you actually make sure you see on the skin, rather, that you see your dermatologist, and that you get a medication that will help take away some of the activity so that the skin will get better.
Awesome. Dr. Michaela, I'd love to bring you in the conversation. What would you suggest? I know you
Well,
see so many patients.
yeah, for me as a provider, the most helpful thing is when you take a picture of what's happening when it's active. Because a lot of times people will come in and say, I had this rash, and they're having a lot of trouble describing it. So I'm so happy when someone has taken a picture of it so I know exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was a good one. Selfies. Okay. Yeah, I definitely have that problem. I think having a journal has been really helpful for me, just being able to write down, like if I have an appointment and I know it's coming up in the calendar invite that I have on my phone, like in the notes section, I'll be like, on this day, this crazy thing happened, or I had this flare up, or I know I'm going on a trip. What should I do to prepare for the fact that I'm going to be outdoors? Unfortunately, Dr. Worth, I hate hats. My scalp gets so hot, but I'm getting better at the idea of just keeping things covered. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think for me, definitely trying to remember all of the things that I need and being very prepared when I want to talk to my doctor has been really, really helpful.
Yeah, and I
Um,
like the idea of the pictures because you can take those pictures and you can actually often put them onto a chart if you're on a computer chart, and that's a nice record for the doctor to see when you come in for your appointment.
oh,
I
that's
agree.
right. My chart or anything, different hospital systems have these
Right.
electronic systems. That's a really good idea. I do have to shout somebody out really quickly. Apparently, it's somebody's anniversary. Is that a true thing? Somebody said happy anniversary, or maybe they were just saying happy anniversary to themselves in the chat. I was trying to make sure somebody didn't know some information that I didn't know. But Dula wanted to say this was a yeah. I really appreciate this. This is helpful to me because I'm still just getting used to the lupus affecting my skin, and even though I did a really good job with my makeup today, but it definitely sometimes can bother me. Oh, this is so great. So now we're gonna oh wait, Dr. Michaela, you just closed us out so lovely.
So I'm just excited for another exciting, episode. So many helpful stories that we're learning from. Just excited for the season to come. Thank you so much, Ray, Charisma, Dr. Worth, for your time and advice. It's been so helpful.
Yeah,
Thank y'all for having
definitely.
us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Yes.
Thank
Talk
you
to
for
you.
joining us.
So we also want to thank our viewers. We have our regulars. Of course, every week we have new viewers. So thank you for joining us. We are sending a special thank you to Biogen for making this show possible. If anyone is interested in getting more information about lupus or information about participating in clinical trials, you can use your camera on your phone. Please scan this QR code so you guys see it right up on the screen, or you can go to the link listed out, which is Biogen, Biogen, trial, TRIAL, link.com. And if you're interested in a specific lupus clinical study, you can scroll to the bottom of that website screen to learn more. So don't worry if you didn't catch the code now. We will be sharing the link and QR code again at the end of the show in case you missed it. But you can also see the chat for a direct link as well. So we've got lots of ways for you to get the information you need.
And we got to send a special shout out to our executive producer, Savine DaCosta, who's not watching right now, but we want to make sure we know she's going to watch the replay for making sure that this happens over at Biogen. Now, don't forget to join our community. Please follow us on Instagram at 4BetterTogetherLupus, the number 4BetterTogetherLupus, and on Facebook at Better Together Lupus. Please make sure you check out our past episodes. We put a lot of work into having some amazing guests over the last 4 seasons. Now we're in season 4. Please check it out in the video section of this platform to learn more about how to live your best life with lupus.
And now, as always, we'd like to hear some spoken word from Chanel. Thank you.
This skin of mine served as my armor, protected me from mean faces, hot days, sun rays, but I'm afraid I'm more thin skinned than I used to be. The new skin I'm in brings plenty of insecurities. If one rough day will steal away my beauty, will break the mirrored image I've sworn would always stay, but I can't let that fear chip my armor, the layers of skin that protect me. Now just needs a little more of my protection. I stand at the junction of what was, what it is, and what could be. My skin reflects the health of me. While sunbathing is an impossibility, I will radiate my contentment from within, glisten with every shimmer of joy I can bring to the surface. I will treasure my ability to shine. Make that the first thing everyone sees, because my self worth is not external. My self worth is more than just skin deep. Thank you, everyone. See you in 2 weeks here on Better Together.